in Bitcoin circles, we say, fix the money, fix the world. Is that like where we should focus our energies to have this outsized return? And if not, then where should we be focusing our energies?
Yeah, to continue on Hans Hoppe, as you mentioned, I think he gave a great advice. And if you're talking about like changing legitimacy structures and narratives, he thought the most important thing you can do is ridiculize. But in a sense, it's not like mean, it's just like showing that the emperor has no clothes.
Right.
Just speaking it out. And
make fun of the satire.
Making fun of the right people, in a sense, not taking yourself too seriously. So just say as it is.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's Wolf NYC, WOLFNYC.com. Rahim Taghizadegan, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. We're sitting here in Riga doing this in person, which is awesome. I've been talking about this conversation for a while. You have recommended some very interesting reading, which we're going to go through today. And just by way of quick introduction, you are the last Austrian economist in the entire tradition in Austria. You're the author of over 15 books, and you've been teaching universities in German-speaking areas in Austrian economics and related topics for over 15 years. So quite the impressive background, and I think the right guy to talk to about some of these big ideas. Maybe before we get into everything, though, we could just start with a little bit about you, like who you are, what your journey into this world was, how you got into Austrian economics, and then how you ultimately got into Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. I have Persian heritage, but I've grown up in Austria, and I originally studied nuclear physics. I'm a nuclear physicist by training. I studied economics and sociology as well. And then my working in physics, I visited the United States, and I was surprised to see that there was an Austrian tradition of economics because I hadn't heard about it at university in Vienna. So there was a surprise. I mean, I've heard about some of the proponents, of course, but it was not clear that it was a living tradition that has a relevance for today, not just some historical fact. And so that, of course, increased my interest in it. And I have become a student of Austrian economics. I had the honor to be the student of two of the last, at the time, teaching students within the tradition. It was Roland Bader, German student of Hayek, and Hans-Hermann Hoppe, student of Rothbard, a student of Mises, and I've been teaching for a while Austrian economics. Learned a lot about it. Austrian economics also brought me to Bitcoin. So nowadays it's the other way around usually. The interest in Bitcoin that leads to Austrian economics. Back in the days, was really going from Austrian economics to Bitcoin.
Very cool. Why switch from nuclear physics into economics? What was the inspiration for that?
The natural sciences are very differentiated in the way that you have very specialized jobs to do there. And you deal with the simplest phenomena that are possible to deal with. And I become interested in physics as then in the social sciences in complex phenomena. And I think are more interesting. And then in particular, the complex phenomena that are related to human beings living together and cooperating, coordinating, because there's such a huge leverage. I mean, if as an engineer or physicist, you seem to work on very small parts of the world. And then, unfortunately, there is an outsized impact of wrong ideas in the social science. There's much more leverage. I find much more important to strive for better understanding, better ideas in those complex phenomena that really matter to people. And questions of life and death eventually.
Very cool. What is there much? Do you think there's much benefit you get from having studied nuclear physics and studying the social sciences? Or are they two totally different, distinct spheres for you?
There's one huge benefit. I'm not easily impressed by physicists, natural scientists.
Right.
You know, you call it something like white collar phenomena, like the doctor.
The doctors. So the physics envy that Keynesian economics suffers from, you see through that.
Yeah.
Very useful. Okay, that's cool. I feel like I'm sitting across the table from a very highly qualified genius, so I'm excited to wrestle with some of these big ideas. You recommended a number of really good books or written works, the first of which was The Theory of Complex Phenomena by Hayek, which is just, I guess, an essay that was published as an article, as you said. You also recommended Theory and History by Mises, which is an interpretation of social and economic evolution, is the subtitle to that one. And the third one you recommended, which I didn't get to read, but hopefully we can discuss in the future. The author's name?
Erik Voegelin?
Yes. Yes. So we're not going to talk about that today, but I think I should just mention it. And maybe you could tell us why you recommended these three. For a little bit of backstory, we met at a dinner in Prague, and we started talking about the relationship between psychology and economics. And then we said we'd have this conversation. And I think you recommended these readings based on that.
Exactly. I never recommend books. If you ask me, can you recommend a book? I wouldn't, because it doesn't make sense. It all depends on what are you interested in.
Right.
And then all the things you mentioned you were interested in was just, I don't even remember.
Yeah.
Conversation is just, I thought, okay, you should have a look at that. And have a look at that. And then I think I also recommended Carl Gustav Jung
yes.
as well. What else? They were talking about Wittgenstein.
Yeah, and so, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Jungian psychology and Austrian economics, they sort of came up together to some extent for a while. Like, the same thinkers were in the same place, is that correct?
Yes, they are like, there's one Austrian School of Economics, but I would say 3 Austrian schools of psychology, and Jung is one proponent of a direction coming as a student of Freud, then as a follow-up with Freud, as all of his students have eventually, or most. It's like the discovery of the unconscious, I'd say, is that as a Freudian insight, but Jung pursues this in I think, a better direction than Freud. And there's another one would be Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. Okay.
Psychologist, or very interesting, promising approach to psychological phenomena, and that's another tradition, so a different one. But there's a different schools emerging out of the crazy situation of old Vienna.
Right. Well, I think it was Jung that said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. So it's weird how these ideas grip groups of people at the same time. We often see inventors inventing similar things at the same time, even when they're not in connection with each other. So it's strange how people are connected in that way.
Mm.
And what are the relevant contact points between Jungian psychology and Austrian economics? Like, what is it? What is the overlap, I guess, in your view?
It's little known, but Jung wrote a little bit about economics and political issues, in particular I think it was rather speeches he gave, and then he wrote up a little bit about that, and there he sounds exactly like an Austrian economist. Points he makes, and there's a big overlap with Eric Voegelin, and it's a kind of psychopathology of political collectives and political ideas, and that arises out of Themology, which was a branch that Mises proposed, how to understand psychology in a better way and understand the historical sciences and what their role should be. It's about understanding the unconscious of human beings and their behavior as opposed to their action, I'd say. And so there's a close relation. Eric Voegelin was a member of the Mises Circle in Vienna. Jung was not, but I mean, it could be the same ideas come up at the same time by different people. But I think it's not surprising. So I think Jung is part of this interdisciplinary project.
Right.
And I think the Austrian School of Economics is part of, and then was understanding and coping with modernity.
Almost like we, the human enterprise is waking up to the realities of complexity theory, right? Versus moving out of the Newtonian worldview into something, the billiard ball model of the universe, A causes B, B causes C, to this, things are much more complex than that, right? There's feedback, feed forward, loops, everything's interconnected.
Interestingly, that also emerges in physics in Vienna as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Complexity theory?
Thinking, yes. Part of it, I mean, comes from thermodynamics.
Yes.
So part of it, quantum physics, of course.
Right.
We had Schrödinger.
Schrödinger. So we as a species are kind of waking up to the old paradigm is limited or low resolution, and things are much more complex. And then you see it manifest in psychology and economics and physics.
Yes. But there's also an impression of crisis, like something is going in the wrong direction, calamity awaiting. That's also important to know for the emergence of the Austrian School, and that's how those are related. They are like trying to figure out what's going on.
Right.
Why are people turning crazy? It was like Vienna was the capital of neurosis. And it's like every crazy idea at the time met at the same coffee shops and salons in Vienna, and was really trying to figure out what's going on.
And that crisis point was the 20th century, right?
Yes.
World War I, World War II.
20th century, but in the late 19th century, it became apparent to the most astute observers in Vienna that there was an issue with going from like old traditional society to modernity. And some were very pessimistic, others were optimistic, but most astute observers knew that something, we need to understand something about society and human nature.
And the pessimists were right, mostly.
Unfortunately, in the short term at least.
Yes, in the short term. Okay, maybe we could start with something simple. And you mentioned two terms that a lot of people would brush over as maybe synonymous, but in economics, they're not. Behavior versus action. How do we distinguish between human behavior and human action?
Behavior is, or let's start with human action. For human action, and it's mainly Ludwig von Mises really pointed the finger to that. It's a lot of things when we're there observing look like behavior, but we know something from ourselves. We know that we have ends, and we know that we employ means to achieve our ends. And if an observer doesn't know us, looks at us, might say some things don't make sense to him. But by knowing that human beings act and are not determined to behave in a certain way, and certainly don't behave like particles, you have a deeper understanding. But of course, there are parts of human behavior, either if you're observing them, because it's past events, of course, you can only observe something that has already happened.
Sure.
And a lot of history is like observations passed through secondhand, and people you can't ask anymore. So they'll be, like I'd say, behavior, observed behavior. And there you can only see some patterns and try to figure out with your praxeological understanding, with your knowing that human beings have ends and have had ends in the past, and maybe very different ones, and things you don't agree with, and things you have a hard time understanding. But still, that helps a bit figuring out, but it's not everything. So Ludwig von Mises thought it's best to look at history as something different, because it always sees like the observable pattern, the remainders of what has happened. And you should approach it empathically and try to understand, knowing that they were human beings and they lived their life and they were striving for something. But it's not, you can't deduce now from what has happened. And he thought we should generalize it. He knew that it's not just the outside observations, but there are also, of course, we have diaries, we have dreams, we have symbols. It's all that, and that's what he called themology. It's from themos. It's like the spiritedness. It's a translation. Themos originally, the Greeks thought that as an organ. It brings about your temper and then how you are as personality, like your personal expression, your spiritedness, if you like the term. And he thought, yes, we have to understand it in this more general ways, not just outside observations. We are not automata. General interest, how have people expressed their temper? What is it like? What are the moods coming from? So more it's behavior, but also looking at the unconscious and subjective and ideas, for example. But there you can really deduce. It's a kind of figuring out, observing and finding patterns, maybe. And yeah, that's epistemologically is a different aspect to looking at things. And he thought it's a separate field of economics, and it's a separate kind of science, a separate way to do science. It shouldn't be confused.
Yeah. So behavior being something more reflexive, right? The doctor taps your knee with a hammer and your leg kicks out. That's a behavior.
Yeah. But with human beings, there is not that much. So there's a tradition called behaviorism that exaggerates this component. Things like almost everything is behavior, or everything is a reaction to something.
Right.
And the approach of Mises is the opposite.
Right.
So, a lot of things, they look like behaviors. It's better to see like behavior as things where you don't know why someone is doing it. It's not a reason behind it. It's a cause maybe.
Yes.
Behind it, like someone was pushed and he fell.
Right.
There'll be a cause, but of course you can never be sure if it's not like someone acting or it's a game. And all that sense making and meaning comes from your understanding that you're a human being and you can have empathy for someone else and try to understand, okay, what did you want to achieve? You want to fall down? Was it an accident? Did he try to show something? Want to prove a point? Was it a fight? All those questions.
So it's the self-reflection, the reflection upon ourselves. We know that we have means and ends. We're purposefully striving towards valued aims that we can extrapolate that other people are doing the same thing, right? So and then that opens up this whole world of praxeology.
Yeah, it's a very small thing that we have, but it's one, and it's only for this subsection of complex phenomena which are related to human beings, social phenomena, human phenomena. There we have an advantage as compared to everything else.
Right.
We are the thing that we try to understand. So in science, we can have empathy, we can have understanding, we can go through similar experiences, and that helps. It's not a lot, but still, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, what is the quote, that man is both the clay and the sculptor kind of thing, right? Which is why life is suffering. And so we're kind of like, and I guess this distinguishes man from animal too, that we have these plans or purposes, or we use means to pursue ends, whereas so far as we can tell about animals, they're just kind of, they carry out an evolutionary pattern that doesn't change very much over time. Whereas our cultures can change rapidly over time, right? So
maybe have freedom that comes with it, responsibility.
Yes.
Which is we can make mistakes. We make lots of mistakes and we feel something inside. We feel like, why are I did a wrong thing? For an animal, usually it doesn't happen. Of course, they make mistakes in a sense, but there's a responsibility. And you got caught by the predator, so your fault in a sense. It's part of the program. It's part of our biosphere. And for human beings, there's a lot of pressure on our shoulders, a lot of burden. So freedom is a huge burden. There was an important insight by Frankl, tangentially. He thought it's better to focus on responsibility than freedom, because most people, if they hear freedom, it's like, yeah, I like freedom, of course. But in practice, we see like most people don't really prefer freedom if it comes with the whole package. There's responsibility, like being a sovereign person that is able to take responsibility for his acts. That's why he can have freedom, or she can have the freedom.
Right.
So otherwise, I mean, it's just random acts, or always you're a victim. You can always blame someone. It's not my fault. Do it.
The responsibility. Maybe there's like a Pareto principle thing there, where you have like 80% followers, 20% leaders kind of thing. And freedom necessitates responsibility, because like, okay, you have all these options at your disposal, but what are you going to choose that actually benefits yourself in the long run and ideally benefits others? Because one of the points Mises makes, I thought was brilliant. Okay, we all use means to pursue ends, but what is the common means that almost all of us need? And that is social cooperation, right? That is society, right? No matter what end you want to achieve, unless you're a monk or an ascetic, living completely in solitude somewhere, meditating on a mountain, which very few of us are, you need other humans. You need social cooperation. You need specialization, division of labor, all of these things.
That's the optimism in Ludwig von Mises. I was usually disappointed during his lifetime, but I think in the long term it held up, and he'd say so. And he'd say, unfortunately, it can go on for a long time. This kind of fallacies. Usually it's the zero-sum fallacies. And he thought like every human being should be able to understand, not maybe conceptually, but by figuring out the alternative. And if you really see the cost of not cooperating, like interventionism destroying the basis of cooperation, then you'd feel it. You feel it as hunger. You feel it as death of your children. War. You would not consciously choose that.
Yes.
You may say the words and you utter the phrases that you like that kind of existence. But he thought most human beings, apart from some pathological cases, he thought most human beings would be aligned in the ends, in those like crucial ends of like choosing health over disease and choosing life over death. There's a kind of general mutual understanding there should be. And he thought the task of the economist just like clarifying that, making it visible to people, like making visible the invisible. And Frederick Bastiat said, one predecessor of the Austrian School, and like making people realize that ideas have consequences, and figure out if you really like the consequences or not.
It's a great point. And it maybe rolling back or circling back to the 20th century crisis, wasn't that an attempt, because obviously Mises is very anti-state, right? That statism is a lot of the problem and driving a lot of these false ideologies in the world. Was it people treating other people as these automata, I think is the term you use, where you can just implement the plan and move people, they're pieces on a chessboard effectively.
Yes.
Where you're totally discrediting their autonomy, right? They're the fact that they are human actors, right? They're not human behaviorists, or they're not just behaving, they're acting, I guess.
Yes.
Is that what drove that crisis? Is this idea that we could somehow top down organize the world, and that just failed to see the reality of this bottom up, individual selection of means at valued ends? Is that what drove that crisis?
It's part of it. It's part of it. But the crisis is manifold. It's the change from an order, and it was an order. It's more like, say, the feudal European order,
Deities and such.
Religion as well, say strong religious traditions that give meaning to people and give them a place in this order, and they can accept the order they are living in, the kind of just or God-willed order with all problems there are. They are not looking for a utopia. And then there have been rapid changes in particular, it was the rate of innovation going up. And one important change is when innovation is above a certain threshold, you can't do what your father has been doing and your grandfather has been doing, which makes it usually easier. You have inherited roles, which are functional roles. You know your place in society. You know that you're useful. You just be hardworking as your father was, and you follow the guidance, of course, of the old. You can still learn something useful from your grandfather. If there's too much change, the world is so different, it looks like you can learn nothing useful from grandfather. You're the one teaching them, like helping figuring out a smartphone or a computer, and then it's just stories, and it leads to kind of skepticism, and then it leads to a kind of pride and saying, okay, we are reshaping the world. It's just the future. The past doesn't interest in us anymore. It's not relevant anymore. But you need the link to the past for the structure and the order of society, at least as it was, or as in most societies, like giving you an idea where you're coming from, where you're going to, why is it meaningful in a way to live that kind of life. And when it disappears, you get a vacuum. And then, of course, organized religion disappears in a sense. It's challenged by modern sciences. It seems also backward and old-fashioned. And some people try to grasp on panic because they realize they are right, that if you change something which you haven't understood yet, everything may come all crashing down. That was actually what Emperor Francis Joseph in early 20th century, in late 19th century Austria, came to the conclusion. So it was extremely conservative, not in a good sense, but the reasoning was not so bad. He thought, I don't know what will be the impact. I see everything is changing. Let's not change what doesn't have to be changed. But that looks ridiculous to the young people in particular. It starts looking ridiculous. It's like people LARPing. I think it's a great term. It looks like LARPing. You had like the feudal order and the nice costumes and a lot of aestheticism. But you feel it's not authentic anymore. It's not, I mean, they look like the big warriors.
Yeah, because it's not relevant.
It's not relevant. Yeah. It's not that kind of military full structure. It's not useful anymore. And it looks like acting.
Yes.
And then it comes crashing down. I mean, what comes after it seems worse is like the pride, the worst people usually. Okay, I know what's right. I'll tell you. I'm
demagogues.
I'm demagogues. Yes. Scientists which stop at a certain understanding of science, and I think they figured it out all.
Right.
So there's just this idea, everything is solved in physics, we don't know it. Everything.
Totalizing knowledge is totalitarian, right?
Yeah. And then figuring out, okay, we can handle complex systems. We are technocrats, technocratic approach. Well, let's just handle it. We'll be social engineers, that's the term. And that appears, of course, if you don't have legitimate narratives anymore of how you should behave, then some people come up and let me through. I'm the doctor. I'll tell you how to fix everything. Yes. And that was a dangerous mix. And a lot of cranks, of course, crazy people who either thought they were the wisest or religious leaders, pseudo-religions emerging. And of course, Hitler and Stalin met in Vienna at the same coffee shop, and there's like gurus, kind of really, really crazy pseudo-religious idealists. Which from the personality are very odd and surprising. That was an astute observation by Jung, Carl Gustav Jung. He thought that look at Hitler, it's like a really shy and mediocre person. If you talk to him in person, and then he goes on stage and he becomes the kind of medium, he thought. Is in the tradition of a religious medium, like bringing forth the message of the grand state God to subjects, giving certainty to people in a time of uncertainty, being kind of know-it-all. I figured it all out. I know who's to blame. I know how we win that.
Right.
And of course, you not only had it in politics, but in the sciences as well. So that's also where a bit of the skepticism of Hayek comes from towards progressive scientific traditions, Enlightenment even. So he thinks there's a wrong kind of Enlightenment, the French one in particular, is a top-down Enlightenment where we are so enlightened, we know everything, and you, the uneducated, unwashed, will teach you how to do it. And he thinks that's a very dangerous tradition, and it would even be better to be a conservative, like not changing anything than following these false preachers.
So that's so interesting. The root then, or the initial driver of this rapid social change then, is the actual technological paradigm, right? It's the innovation that all of a sudden the life of the young living generation is so much different than the past that it starts to break those ties, right? Instead of being a blacksmith like your father and grandfathers went from many generations back, all of a sudden you're working in digital technology or something. And then
the people that are successful, you can figure out, I mean, where is he coming from? Like suddenly he's one of the richest persons in Vienna, and you've never heard about the family. Like it comes from the last corner of the empire, and it doesn't make sense to people. They have a hard time understanding what makes you successful in a changing, dynamic world. What are those people? Is it kind of conspiracy? Or is it mostly Jews, or is it mostly like, who is it? Mostly the Germans among the Polish, and then it starts like trying to class people, and try to make sense of the change.
Right. But even that, it's more based on the kind of idiosyncratic nature of innovation, right? Like, or we discover a thing here, and then someone gets really rich, and all of a sudden their new money and old money is less relevant over time. So that, like the intertemporal structure of society starts to fall apart, right? The linkages to the past.
And then I hope that it's not really just indigenously change, that societies wouldn't be able to handle change, that kind of positive, innovative change. I think it's due to exaggerations. You see, you already have change, but then you have kind of leverage on change, and it's an unjust leverage. I think money plays a very important role there. Of course, it's not a coincidence that we have it's called the Gründerkrach. It's the founders' crash in the late 19th century, 1873. And after that, almost everyone loses trust in the market economy. You see, there's people rising, and then everything crashing down, a lot of scams. And of course, there's a fiat money inflated bubble that emerges. And it takes the dynamic, it feeds a little bit the dynamic, but it exaggerates it.
Right.
And so then it's even harder to just keep up with it. I mean, you wouldn't have a hard time understanding that the train is a better technology or a better means for your end. But if it's then a bubble of trains emerging that for most of it will be shut down, then it's much harder. And I think that you have exaggerated economic change due to fiat, says credit expansion, that's unbacked credit expansion. Confidence games in particular, then with government guarantees, government debt entering the picture, and so on. And you have ideological exaggerations. Of course, one way to react to change is become impatient and saying, change is great, it's not fast enough. And then socialism started out as, capitalism is much better than a full order. But the bad thing about it is it's too slow. It's not enough wealth for everyone. Let's fix it and makes it even more dynamic. Accelerationist approaches, which are quite utopian. And then it seems, then you have counteractions, of course. It's I've seen so much change. Now you're saying it's too little and it's great and I should be happy that everything is falling apart. Give me a break. And then you have the counteractions, of course. And it's I think in ideology is a lot like you have a reaction to something that you don't understand, and you have a counter reaction to that, and you're fighting. And both are in a way right, of course. Change is not neutral in a sense. If something is very positive, something is very negative. You figure it out. But the question is always, can you come up with a better system? It doesn't make sense to come up with a better system. Can you have control, change, or innovation, things like that? And they come all from the wrong premise.
Yes, the process of creative destruction, right? When you are an Italian shoemaker seventh generation or whatever, and then there's a shoe factory that opens up down the street that's very destructive to you and your lineage and your livelihood, but it's also really good in advancing human economization. So I can see where those individuals then become susceptible to being sold these false ideologies. It's like, oh, capitalism ruined your business. What you need is socialism instead.
Yes, but
and that's the insert point for the demagogues, right?
Yes, but typically it's not the craftsman. A good craftsman, a good shoemaker will find his way.
Right.
He'll use it, and then probably he'll become the factory owner or enter some other.
Right.
Usually it's like people already don't really have useful occupations, so a lot of it was the old feudal nobility, but their sons, like the minority complexes and so on. So former upper class that can't find a new place and a new structure. That's the danger where it comes from. So pretty privileged people. It's not like the downtrodden, the poor shoemaker. That's really the ferment of socialism. It's rich guys. It's rich sons that have leisure, still wealthy. Yeah. But the prestige of their position changes, and they feel uncertainty. I think they.
Are we going through that now, do you think, with the politicians and traditional political structures now facing irrelevance in a digital paradigm? Do you think we'll see something like that?
Yes.
I'm partial here because I agree with the optimism you mentioned for Mises, that he thought in general people would see the results of, hey, look, they tried the false ideology over here, catastrophe, and we tried life, liberty, property over here. We had success. So obviously let's adopt this model. I agree with that, actually. I think that most people could see that and understand that, but we're always fighting this fight against demagogues selling false ideologies, right? Like even today, we hear a lot of the problems in the world being blamed as late stage capitalism, for instance.
Yes.
People really buy into that. Yeah. They buy into that notion that people having exclusive rights to the fruit of their labor and trading with other people that have exclusive rights to the fruits of their labor somehow creates this catastrophic situation we have in the world. Yeah. Whereas, I think as Austrian economists and Bitcoiners would largely argue, no, it's statism, it's central banking, it's these things that are causing the falling apart. So what can we do if you're always going to face that? Like, is it just education? Is it just trumpeting more like, no, actually we need more capitalism, not less. We need stronger property rights, not own nothing and be happy. Like, how can we penetrate the mind? It seems like it's always the minds of the young too, right? The people that are most impressionable, that are targeted with these pseudo-religious ideologies. And what can we do, I guess, or we're just always going to be stuck in this kind of pendulum swing, or is there a way to actually progress closer to Mises optimism?
As an individual, or you can't plan for a kind of change. I mean, how am I reaching the minds of millions or billions of people? The best advice, if you really wanted to do that, would be start a religion. And I'll watch you fail, and it'll be okay, and maybe the least harm brought about. So it's not the demagogues, it's not like some evil persons emerging. There's a real need for this kind of guidance, and it's more spiritual guidance. So it's a religious function, and I think it was an important insight, and mainly due to Eric Voegelin, who really analyzed ideas for history, and he figured out that most of politics really should be understood from the realm of theology. Political ideas replace the religious ideas of the past. They're all like struck narratives around meaning for orders and system structures, societal structures. That's the point about it. People need that. They are looking for someone to tell them what a good order looks like, and then what's their place within that order. So anything where you cope with life in a good way and be a good example is helpful, because like the opposite, offering a false panacea, I just follow my words. So I thought to the individuals, try to be a good example, try to cope with life, which is a huge challenge, the only individual one. I realized there's some things in human nature, and part of that is a kind of spiritual longing, and being understood and addressed. So I think it's wrong just address people. Okay, you are stupid. I gotta fix you because you have that need. Try to understand compassionately where the need comes from, and then figure out how you can show that's the wrong means to ends that are there, and that's the only thing they can do. But you can do. But most change, of course, I mean, the individual, you never know what's your impact on the future.
Yeah.
Usually it's negligible. Sometimes it's outside, historic, but you can plan for that. So just lead a good life. Maybe you have an outsized impact. Maybe not, that you don't know. Most change comes rather from, let's say, technology. These days, like figuring out new ways that can be copied by other people by seeing, okay, oh, that's a good means. I have the ends as well. Let me do it. And not so much conviction or like preaching to people to convince them to pick up something. The preaching has a different function. It's like fulfilling your spiritual needs, giving you a narrative structure within which you can fit in the order of things, in the order of society.
Yeah.
So that's a different way to look at it. So don't think that politics or political debate is about really convincing someone of a better argument. But there's hope. There's a hope. That was also part of Mises' optimism. He thought that everyone, or almost everyone, should be capable of argumentation. But he also knew, of course, it's a very tough discipline, and it needs some the proper surroundings. And I think it's the salon atmosphere is like a friendly kind of friendliness. You are in the living room of someone who trusts you, and you can be intimate in a sense, and you can have wrong answers and stupid questions and stuff like that, and can be open-minded because you know it's not a different interest is clashing there. Otherwise, you can really have a debate in the sense that you argue for something and try to convince someone. Usually it's interests, and that we have to appreciate. Human beings are material, they have material interests, and they are conflicting. And then, of course, it's all your anticipation. I mean, am I rather beneficiary of the structure that I live in and the narratives of it, or not? Are you a threat to that? So I'm not sure yet if I feel that that's as good as it gets for me. Then, of course, I'd be not that open-minded to change things like the monetary system. Be open-minded to Bitcoin. So I think one general indication is how privileged are you.
So this is why wealthy people would tend to be more conservative in the traditional sense. Right, that they want to preserve the existing structure that has benefited them.
Yes.
Whereas people that are less wealthy would be more liberal in the traditional sense, that they want change, right? Hierarchical change and such.
Yes. Unfortunately, the term conservative is misleading, and Heidi wrote an article on that. Of course, what people then are preserving and try to preserving, if they preserve a privilege or structure, is a detrimental change, a detrimental dynamic. Is not something as it is. It's a dynamic system that, of course, intervenes and changes and makes good things disappear as well. So that's a kind of a wrong preservation of, I'd say, privileged structures, unjust structures.
And is this, as we're talking, what keeps coming up for me here is the Nietzschean death of God. Right, that he sort of saw this all coming.
Yes,
it's like the religious guiding light, or the religious institutional structure that has guided humanity up until this point was crumbling.
Yes,
and that nature abhors the vacuum. Right, so something has to fill that power vacuum that's created. And I think he said something like, "Well, we've killed God, and we'll never find enough water to wash away all the blood." Almost, presaging the 20th century in many ways. What is it? We need a mythology. We need a story. We need a guiding narrative of some kind. And I guess religion sort of played that role in the past. And as it crumbled, we now have like the nation state, but then the nation state comes with all these pseudo-religious ideologies, right? God kings, if you will, right? Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Lenin, etc. It seems useful that if we could look at ourselves in that way and like, oh, we are these storytelling animals. We're animals with plans, that we could start to understand. Maybe we'd be able to see through some of that bullshit. So what is, and the other interesting part, so it's like, okay, we need the guiding narrative or mythology, but there's also this, do we call this a material dialectic, that as technology changes and the way we relate to the world changes, actually changes our narratives too. And I'm reflecting here on Mircea Eliade. He studied mythologies across history, and he said one of the main things that changes, the primary drivers that change mythology, are how their technology changes.
Yes.
So they go from hunting and gathering to agriculture. All their gods change, all their stories change.
Technology changes the structure of society, and the order of society is closely related to the mythology.
Yes.
That was another insight by Voegelin. And of course, it's a big part of what Jung tried to figure out, how mythology plays into that. What's the role of mythology, the proper role of mythology?
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like if we could maybe present human beings in that light, and people could start to see themselves like, oh, we're these tool-making, planning creatures. And then as the tools change, the plans and the stories change. So then maybe we'd be less susceptible to these demagogues. It's like, oh, there's no one guy with all the answers, right? It's like, actually, we just all have plans and questions, and we're trying to figure it out as we go. I don't know if that maybe presumes too much about human beings. You said to Mises that he thought everyone was capable of rational argumentation. I don't know about that, actually. Like, I see a lot of people that are very much just want to believe the louder one, right? Or the one that's using more ad hominem or acts more confident or whatever it is. Like, there seems to be this big proclivity for, I don't know, 80% of people to just follow that guy versus follow Mises that's making this sound rational.
Mises would say those are preferences, so they have higher ranked needs there.
Yeah.
They have to fulfill first, but the potential is still there. I mean, if those needs that are expressed by pseudo debates, like being right because it's in my interest to be right, and showing how you're foolish because you're of the wrong kind of interest group, if that's fulfilled, if you take it apart, it still say human beings by nature have potential to seek knowledge. That was Aristotle said, and it's, of course, it's not an empirical fact about human beings.
Right.
It's a conceptual understanding of human nature that we are capable of something, and we have a potential. It doesn't mean everyone reaches every time. No one reaches it all the time.
Yeah.
But something you can long for.
And maybe this is then somewhat of a carryover of our tribal past, that we still look for that like strongman leader. And so people will just, if Hitler's up there giving the impassioned speech, you're just like, you buy into that.
Yes.
No matter what the content of the argument, it's just because of how he's presenting it.
Yeah.
But we can change over time then. So you think that in general, human beings could become more likely to follow rational, argumentative leaders rather than just these rhetorical people capable of rhetorical flourish, like a Hitler or something.
Not in politics, but it depends on how you see politics. And Carl Gustav Jung thought that politics itself is a problem, and many followers of the Austrian School thought so. Also, my teacher Roland Bader had a great saying, things like, the economy brings people together and politics brings them apart. And that's the difference. There's a kind of like a zero-sum logic ingrained in politics, because you want to express like the will of one collective, and Jung described it very well. Like even in Switzerland, democratic Switzerland, he thought that it was a negative tendency. Like people thought they had killed the king, but actually he wasn't dead. He became a zombie, he calls it a specter or a ghost. So it's still there because it's the idea. It's like we don't have a ruler anymore. We rule ourselves idea. But it's not we cooperate ourselves, because cooperation is usually doesn't work in a way that one has to plan about everything, or everyone needs to know the exact plan. It's just figuring out, trusting each other and seeing where is really the win-win possibility there. Whereas this organization, Mises called it the principle of organization. It's like I'm telling you, as if I knew everything, as if I could be an outside observer from the top and looking at you. You mentioned the pieces of the chessboard, and so you should be there, and that's your job, and you got to do that. And it's not working well for big tasks. And unfortunately, politics usually means going for big tasks, do it by a top-down organization, and everyone needs to go along with this kind of tribalism still as kind of homogeneous structure as well, and the replacement of religion as something tying a group together, giving a common narrative. So it's all the wrong ingredients. So it's a big skepticism towards politics and expecting change to come, positive change to come from everything but politics, and politics following suit.
Yeah, there's a song by the Police, I think the opening lyrics or something like, "There is no political solution to our troubled evolution. Take no faith in constitution. It's a bloodless revolution," something like that. But yeah, I agree. I don't see, obviously we need to have political orders because we are choosing the rules for ourselves. And so the political apparatus is basically deciding what rules govern the society. But in an ideal world, we would just have fixed rules, right? Like life, liberty, property, everyone go out and play the game. Because when you create the rule-making body, you create this two-tier economic system where there's people that can apply and subvert or avoid the rules, and then all the people that have to abide by the rules. So you get the rules for thee, not for me dynamic. And that seems to be like the main problem. You want a level playing field for everyone, but you don't have it in this two-tier system.
I differentiate between rules and regulation, I think. That's one way to look at it. And he thought rules should be simple and clear for everyone, and in the sense that you can generalize them. And regulation is a kind of intervention, like find a law that fits exactly that case. That brings you in an arbitrarily better position than another one tries to fix something. It's kind of interventionism, legal interventionism.
Right. Yeah,
and rules could also be like norms, cultural norms, and of course, cooperation is helped by being, in a sense, positively predictable. You keep your promises. It's a kind of rule, a simple rule, and it's a conducive rule to cooperation.
Yeah, and then there's the difference between discovered laws or legal discovery versus legislation by fiat. Right, something that, we've observed these conflicts over eons of human interaction. Here's how we resolve them. Versus someone's in a position of power and they write a law that it's just like, you now have to do this or go to jail. Right. So there's definitely a big difference there. And it seems like we get a lot more stability from those discovered rules that are, I guess, mapped onto the realities of human action versus this is just some individual, right, using this law as a means to their own personal end, of whatever it may be. Okay. Going back to this piece, this is Hayek's The Theory of Complex Phenomena. As we're talking offline, there's a difference here between an epistemological stance and a philosophical stance. And maybe it would be useful just to let's just start with definitions, I guess. First of all, what is epistemology? What is philosophy? And then how are these two concepts, what is Hayek doing in this paper to talk about these two concepts?
Yes, originally philosophy was everything, like thinking and wanting to know. That's the meaning of it. And then some disciplines were separated out of it due to their success, and in particular natural sciences. They emancipated from the old philosophy, where it seemed like, of course, natural sciences was part of natural philosophy. But there was not that rate of getting ever better understanding of the world. It seemed like go in circles and didn't have that kind of success story that then the natural sciences had. So philosophy tended to mean everything that's not useful and really helps anyone. It's metaphysics. Everything is not physical, does not change the material world. It's the big questions no one really can give a good answer and can have lots of competing narratives about. So there was a skepticism, in particular in the modernity, then late 19th century. I think, how do you do philosophy? How do you do proper philosophy? How can you know something? And that's the part of philosophy that is self-reflective, as epistemology is. Like the science of what is a science is knowing how you can know, how does it work actually? How do you find out something? How do you know it's true? And it's questions like these. So it's epistemology is all philosophical questions pertaining to how do you do philosophy and how do you know something. There was a tendency to the success of the natural sciences to say, okay, well, we got rid. All that's left in philosophy is useless. Let's get rid of it. We don't care about it. Metaphysics doesn't make any sense. There's only one method, and it's some new scientific method, and it's the method of the natural sciences, and let's just apply it to everything. Let's try to understand human phenomena in the same way we go about understanding particle physics. And then, of course, you have the analogies. You say, okay, well, I've looked at millions of particles. I can look at millions of people. And it's an interesting, complex behavior where I can have some variable and measures them. And then I try to measure human behavior in a way, looking from top as the scientist, is all neutral and just looks at the facts. Of course, is biased in his own interest in making sure he has a good job with enough income and prestige. And then, of course, he has a biased way to think about it. And Hayek called it scientism. So that's one way to exaggerate the force of science as one monolithic method. And he rather goes for a dualism, but it's not the usual dualism. Dualism means you have two methods, maybe two different fields. And the usual dualism was like there are maybe religious or metaphysical phenomena that need a very different methods in understanding than the material phenomena. That's one way they have a dualism. Or the social sciences need a different method than the natural sciences. And he draws the line in a different way. And that's his knowledge about the natural sciences in Austria. You could observe also his father and grandfather in natural science. He was very close to natural scientists and physicists. And he knew that they were up to realizing that, of course, the era of Newtonian physics was over and there were complex phenomena. It was a very impressive thing because suddenly it seemed like for a class of phenomena, the usual physics doesn't apply anymore. So very big, the very small, and the very interrelated phenomena. And that can happen pretty soon. For example, a three-body problem is already complex phenomenon. It's three celestial bodies because of the complex interrelation. And if you look at it, you see it's a very different behavior. It's very different how you can predict the orbits. It's chaos, looks chaotic, chaos theory element there. And he realized, okay, the better dualism is between simple and complex phenomena. And the natural sciences are actually defined by treating mostly the simpler phenomena, of which already some are so complex that you have to use different methods. And the social sciences, of course, are entirely in the realm of the complex phenomena. So they need a new method, not because they are non-natural sciences, it's because they have the same basis in the order of the world, but it's the more complex things that we look at. And most physicists nowadays would agree that physics concerns itself with the simplest phenomena and goes really deep in these fields. And I think it's a good answer to the monism-dualism question there. And it was an epistemological one, and of course it's related to a philosophical stance, which is what does the world look like? Is this distinction? Is this something within the world, or is it in our models? Is there ways of looking at it? And Hayek comes to realization, it's in the real world, but of course it's not a clear-cut line. It's not like here is simple and complex, and the world is not black and white. When you see it, you'll understand that it's complex. And part of it is that you cannot predict the exact configuration, but you can recognize a pattern. And that's its approach. He thinks for complex phenomena, we can understand patterns. We can even predict patterns. And that approach has been useful even in the natural sciences. We now know that in the natural sciences, there are a lot of universal patterns that they don't only apply to phenomena in the natural sciences, also in the social sciences, like power laws. You have power laws in earthquakes, you have power laws in avalanches, and you have power laws in the settlement of cities, the size of the cities, the number of patterns, all kind of scale variant laws where you have a similar pattern.
Yeah,
but of course it's not the approach of I'm a physicist, I'm going to predict you what the city will look like your way because I can put 1 billion people into my model and then come out with the result and tell you what to do and impose laws on you because I've just deduced it from my model. It's a different approach. It's, I recognize something and it's part of a joint reality. So it's not a dualism of two worlds that can't communicate with each other. It's one world, one order, a very intricate, interesting order, and we have to choose the methods on what makes sense.
It's almost like the line of humility, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
Below this line, we can predict that water will freeze at 0 degrees centigrade or some other simplistic natural phenomenon. But beyond this line, we can't know, right? Yes. We can't know how any human will respond to any given set of circumstances, for instance. And there it is, right? Simplicity and complexity.
Yeah.
But it's still somewhat arbitrary, but it's arbitrary to the extent of what I guess our current tools, technologies, techniques allow us to predict.
Yes, and what you look at as well. So there's a subjective component as well. Hayek thinks that by evolution, we have mastered the understanding of some patterns that have been very important to our survival. So we're really great at discerning some very complex patterns, recognize them immediately, like for faces, for example.
Right.
We have amazing capacity to distinguish tiny differences in faces with complex structure and really getting in the unconscious indications of health and lots of things that have been important for our evolution. But for other things, we are not that apt and we need methods. We need tools to figure out that complexity. And he thought it may be misleading because those things seem so simple. We think that everything is simple. Complex phenomena. We think human beings are simple. But of course, they are not at all.
Right.
And that's the challenge here.
Yeah. Philosophy, I think Philia Sophia, right? The love of wisdom, where it comes from originally.
Yeah. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. Looks like a mini iPhone, a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touch screen. It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet.
Is this the natural sciences, where we said, there's only one monolithic scientific method, we'll discard the rest, we don't need philosophy, any of this? Was that the pendulum swinging too far post-Enlightenment that we thought, because we did tap into something very useful, right? The scientific method, empiricism, et cetera, gave us all of the, not all, but it advanced society very rapidly from a technological standpoint. Yeah. Did we then just kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater? Like, this is the answer to everything. We don't need all this other stuff.
Yes, exactly. And that emerged in Vienna as well. That's logical positivism or empiricism. That's the idea that you can scrap everything that can't be described scientifically, and scientifically is only one method. And nothing can be of value that can't be described as data points leading to generalized laws.
Right.
And interestingly, Wittgenstein was considered to be part of the group, but he had the opposite approach. He understood, of course, the challenge that metaphysics can't be dealt with the methods needed in logics nor in the natural sciences. But he came to the opposite conclusion. He thought that, okay, the relevant things cannot be described by the methods of science.
Yes.
So he was even, in a way, it was very insulting to the logical positivists and the empiricists. They invited Wittgenstein to the meetings because they thought he's one of us, because he was very critical about metaphysics, because he thought it's a wrong idea to mix things that have nothing to do with each other. So he thought he's one of them. And when they invited him to their meetings, he would just, instead of discussing philosophy, he'd start reciting Indian poetry. I don't think it was meant in a mean way. Yeah. He really thought that those like inner truths and relevant metaphysical things can only be expressed by art, aesthetics, and kind of experience approach. And so he thought his Tractatus was like the end of philosophy. He solved it. He knew that about the things that philosophy usually deals with, and the questions asked it can really solve. And if you can't talk about it, then you should better shut up. What he's like saying, and then do poetry or do something good with your life. And what he did after he finished the Tractatus, he stopped philosophy and became an elementary school teacher.
Oh, okay.
Like teaching kids, getting impressed, mathematics, living a good life. His main advice was travel light, don't carry a lot of baggage. So it was kind of the opposite of like the big scientific guru has figured it all out and tells you what to do. It's like, I figured it out. I can't tell you what to do. You got to live a good life.
There's humility there, right? You can't. There is no final answer. There's no final plan. There's no utopian vision. It's more like a discovery process, right? Learning about yourself, learning about the world, and then how you can fit into the world in a good way, right? A way that hopefully you derive meaning, and then ideally, I think for most people, we derive meaning adding value to others, right? Whether that's being parents or teachers or colleagues, whatever it may be. Another thing that's strange about that is to think that science is the be-all, end-all answer. It's almost a paradox, perhaps, because there's no actual scientific justification for the superiority of science, right? We're just saying like, this thing is useful, right? It's been useful for us, but that's not, you can't run the scientific method on science itself and say, this is the thing we should choose. So if you say science is the only answer, you're kind of like knocking the slats out from under science itself in a way.
Yes, I think one has to distinguish. I mean, science, I think the English language also mainly means the natural sciences and a certain method attached to it. And part of the natural sciences, in particular, this part that lends itself to engineering, has been very successful.
Yes.
So it's really, we have managed mankind to figure out regularities in the order of the world and use that to our advantage, and that I think can't be disputed. It still, I mean, doesn't tell you morally if that's good or not, but for me, it still would be kind of progressive optimist and say, people, if it's a better way to their ends, people will choose it. There's no way in like calling that immoral, that people want to live a better life and then use technology as the means, basically, and getting better means. And even if that has an impact on the structure and someone wouldn't like it or thinks it's dangerous, he'd rather expect that human beings will try it out, and there's no way you can bring it back into the box of Pandora. It's open. So it's better to like live with it, understand it, and cope with the dynamic that's happening. But the thing is, when you apply engineering in fields where it doesn't work, then it gets dangerous, and that's the social engineering. That's like you want to make. There's a good analogy by Herbert Spencer, which partly another predecessor of the Austrian School. He said the wrong approach is like a child that thinks it can make a clock better work by using a hammer and a chisel. It's like it's a complex mechanism. You have no clue about it,
Right.
but you think you gotta fix it.
Yes.
And that's the problem, of course. And usually it's a humiliating experience, really wanting to understand complex phenomena, and usually it leads to a different approach. And interestingly, in medicine, we had a Viennese school of medicine as well, and it led to a quite empathic approach to the patient, understanding, even though they were very interested in the latest scientific results, they figured out now the main job of the doctors actually holding your hand and giving you faith that your body will heal itself, and going back to the patient was like the end point of the Vienna School of Medicine. Like going back to the human being that is there.
Right.
It's like a holistic thing. It's not just something to be fixed.
Yeah.
Because that'll be crazy. Like you can't create it. You cannot just take out your toolbox. Of course, I mean, you can fix some bones and so on, but you can't fix a complex organism like that. And usually it's a misleading approach.
Yeah, it's difficult enough even to diagnose, right, what's going on, much less fix it in a complex system. And this necessary humility in the face of nature, right? That we don't understand all the connections and relations between the elements. So, and we've seen this countless times, right? Like what did we do? I think it was the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We sprayed DDT as this pesticide all in North America. We're thinking we're doing good, right? We're killing the insects and increasing crop yields. And now, decades later, we're still dealing with the consequences of that, right? Like the poison has seeped into the water supply, the food supply. So,
no, with DDT, I'd say we're dealing with the consequences of the consequences, because there was a scare story actually about DDT that it would lead to the thinning of the eggshells of birds and would lead to the disappearance of birds, which was not true. So it wasn't as bad as it was meant out to be. So it led to, in parts, of course, you had overusage, but in parts you had underusage of DDT, and malaria came back with another toll as well. So it's always quite complex. And we tend to like throw out baby with the bathwater. As I said, it's like reaction, counter reaction. So it was a popular silent spring, which I think from more stand, it was right to point your finger, like look at long-term effects, look at what that might mean for an ecosystem. It was a very good way to approach it, because but as it seemed to be such a virtuous way to approach it, then we are quite selective in the scientific rigor we apply to things. And also, I mean, fear is a very strong driver, emotion. So I think you can err in both ways. Being too fearful of new technologies and then being accelerationist. I think you got to force it on everyone. Just accept fear is natural.
Yes.
Very natural. And it's a warning sign, and sometimes it's useful. If it's politicized, if it becomes a hype, if it's abused by people, then fear itself, of course, can be quite dangerous and detrimental to development.
Yeah, and this is perennial to the human condition, right? That we're constantly trying to figure out that fine line of like, where do we intervene to shape the course of events in our favor, and where do we have the humility not to intervene, right? That maybe we don't understand DDT fully, let's not spray it on everything. But even with the good intentions, right? We're trying to prevent malaria or whatever it may be. So, I mean, that seems like something we'll just always be dealing with. So it's always going to be trial and error in a way. And that's actually increasingly concerning as technology progresses, because the errors become potentially much larger, right? That if we misapply a technological solution, that we could destroy ourselves in theory, especially if we get into biological weaponry and things like this.
But only if it's a we that's employing technology. That's politics usually. What is overlooked usually is the engineering. A large part of engineering is based on trial and error. It's not like I know everything, I figure it out, and I learn humility by figuring it out. It's like small individuals trying out something. Usually the inventor is risking most. He really takes all the risk, and you learn from it. He may die because he there was a wrong risk to take. The first people started flying, building planes, experimenting with nuclear physics and so on. Of course, that was a toll, but I think that's great that people were able to bear the responsibility for their acts. It becomes dangerous when it's a political decision. It's like, do we have to employ this technology now? Is it like the panacea for everyone? And there are people who don't want it, who's saying no, and then you get a mandate, or we got to force them to do good. And that, of course, where it ended. And then with DDT, it was, of course, also pictures of people being involuntarily doused by a kind of top-down shower instead of using it in a meaningful, sensible way. Because usually if you offer technology to people, they'd be reluctant first, but if they see it's a good means to their ends, they don't have to do that much education. It's just really if it works or not, and who's bearing the responsibility if it's not working. So the best way is to have an entrepreneur offering it, and people figure out if it's good or not. If you say people are too stupid to figure that out, usually that's a bad sign. People deciding for them, and that have been some of the worst abuses of technology, of course.
Right.
So it's not technology in itself, I'd say, that increases the risks. Is collective action in a large planetary scale. It's
right.
Thinking, the experts all around the world agree, they figured it out. Now we got to douse everyone with the magical stuff we invented.
Yeah, we're gonna fix climate change by seeding the clouds with whatever chemicals, and scary indeed. So we mentioned this earlier, that technology is obviously what's driving societal change primarily, and then the narrative and mythology sort of fits on to the new technological paradigm as it progresses. What role did technological change play in moving away from Newtonian physics? Because obviously you had Einstein basically that created this theory initially, right? That, it's not Newtonian, it's relativity. But then we had to actually observationally corroborate Einstein's theories. So is part of this a progression driven by, I'm not sure, telescopes, what other technologies might have been involved that got us out of the old Newtonian theory into the Einsteinian theory? What was the role of technology there?
Yes, I think increased precision in measurement helped with it, and a lot of it was good engineering and trial and error system, Michelson-Morley experiment for relativity theory, and so on. Is being able to look at scales that are not human scales, very small scales and very large scales, but usually outside of our senses and observation, having the instruments to do so, and then figuring still out it's part of the same world. If we find a very different behavior, then it's odd. We have to cope with that. And originally there was a lot of reluctance to go for that and just say, okay, you must have made an error. Can't be like that. Even Einstein was not happy. He said, God certainly is not rolling the dice. That's random.
Yes. I think he called it quantum entanglement spooky action at a distance, right? It just didn't make sense.
Yes. And of course, there you have conceptual models then that can turn out to be useful as well. I think, there's a reason to assume that our mind has evolved within the world, so it's not totally coderish. We should be able to figure out the regularities, and even our conceptual models can be useful for that. And it has turned out to be that these very theoretical advances then coming from engineering trial and errors and having better measurements, those very theoretical ideas about how it could fit together and what the regularities could be, have led to immense results then in engineering as well. Of course, a lot of new technologies are based on insights of physics. So that was very odd. Most physicists would not have expected that to happen. And maybe that, of course, over time then increased again the standing of physics again and the physics envy. It's like, wow, magicians are really powerful there. But it's really understanding is not physics. You can separate the discipline. Just, complexity and scales and odd behavior of constituents and the equivalence within how the world is constructed. I've still not figured out if it all boils down to one base regularity or is really kind of duality in the world. That's still not obvious. But I'd be optimistic that we'll approach an ever deeper understanding and it'll eventually make sense.
It seems like this too, back to that kind of material dialectic we have with reality, like as we change how we relate to the world, it changes the way society is structured. There seems to be a big lag though, because as we talked about, we still seem to operate somewhat on this 20th century Newtonian paradigm of, people being pieces on the chessboard, which is Newtonian, which is, we left that behind in the middle of the last century, but here we are, early 21st century, still operating social systems on that. How long does it take us to move for relativity to start to permeate our social thinking?
Well, it takes a while. I think we're like in the social sciences in between the Newtonian physics and the modern physics. And it's at the stage of the early simple thermodynamics, which is statistics.
Right.
So it seems to be the most useful approach to phenomena statistics, big data, gathering data, and that has a lot of problems. And of course, thermodynamics has developed, and we know that the simplest systems can be described this way. But not the more interesting, complex ones. We have turbulences and all the interesting stuff large at a higher level of complexity. So I think the stage of the social sciences, the most dominant methodology in economics is econometrics, and I think statistics is thermodynamics for human beings. Which is, I'm not saying it's all wrong. I mean, thermodynamics is very useful, and sometimes there are simple situations. There are actually situations when human beings behave like particles. They can be modeled, and it works perfectly. And you know what it is when you're forced as a human being to stand in line for the security Fiat at the airport. Then you can model perfectly, you can improve on the design of it because you are forced to act like a particle. You stand in line, you go when you can go, and when someone is in the way, you can. But you even would stand for an hour in line. You say, "Okay, I have to." And that's exactly how a particle would behave.
Oh, that's interesting. So when you force people into kind of a narrow aperture, they do start behaving like particles. Like you're constraining their degrees of freedom, basically. So action is there's less unpredictability.
And then the models work. They work perfectly, sweetly. But usually they don't. As we change our behavior, we adapt, we learn, we figure out if everyone is waiting here. Probably there should be another way, shorter way.
Like it'll sneak in, So we talked about the difference between human action and human behavior. We talked about Hayek's work and his distinction between simplicity and complexity, kind of being that line of humility. What can we know deterministically about versus what can we not know deterministically about? Let's talk about now the difference between theory and observation. And now I think a lot of people tend, when they use the word theory, they say it's something like, oh, that's just a theory, right? Conspiracy theory is one that comes up a lot. So it's something that's just speculative, like you think might happen. You don't have any proof for it, these kinds of things. But the theory has a much deeper root, and is actually something more reflective of like how we look at the world or what we choose to look at. It's the frame we're putting on a particular observation, perhaps. And I'll let you kind of get into the etymology of the word itself too. But so how do we distinguish between theory and observation? And why is our traditional sense of the word theory largely incorrect?
Theoria is reflection or looking at the world, if you like. But it's a mental process. It uses reason, and that's the distinction to measurement, maybe. I think the bad name to theory comes a bit as a heritage from the Greeks, and in particular the Neoplatonic traditions, which are to idealists. So they think that the essence of the things is an ideal. It's not what you can measure. And that's the real reality. That's the thing that counts. The real things are the things that you can't measure, that you can conceptualize and you can long to attain as a kind of perfect ideal type of something, and that seeking that. And I think there's reason to be skeptical about that. I think you can't just get rid of that tradition as a very important part of thinking, and was very important also to bring later up to the scientific mindset in a more general sense, and being curious about the world and thinking and being able to work with abstractions as well. Of course, it's useful to use idealized geometrical types, knowing what a circle is, even though you'll never measure perfect circle. But it's useful to be able to use such conceptual tools. And as I said before, I think there's reason to believe that evolution has given us the capacity to use those concepts, and they are not totally opposed to reality in a sense. They're a useful part of reality. They're based on regularities in reality. But you can go astray with theory in that sense, and it turns into fantasy and kind of I can really prove or disprove what the ideal type is, so I make it up. And the worst kind of make up things is I make things up that are useful to me, that are in my interests, that give me prestige, legitimacy, power even. So I think there's a rightful distrust in the very theoretical if there's no way to check it. And one way to check it is to check results. Of course, you can also try to check the character of a person, which you only see if you see him for a very long time and see him act in particular situations. So it's very hard. We are very good at deceiving other people. In particular, the worst of us are very good at that. So one way is to look at results, but results, of course, are only correlations and not causalities. So it can be by chance. It can be you did the right thing, but it didn't work out.
Right.
You did a very mean and bad thing, and it was very successful. So very hard to tell. And then there are ways to cope with the lack of responsibility. And I think that's one good thing about what's then called the positivist tradition, and what's assumed to be the real only scientific tradition is a kind of discipline. So it can be your interest. You must be unbiased as a scientist, and there's a way to prove it. So someone can check it. Someone can take your models, concepts, but in particular your measurements, and then try to replicate it, try to figure out if you've done something wrong or not. But of course, it's a wrong idea, and was too much expected of it that you can always figure out wrong measurements. Because, and we've seen with the replication crisis in the sciences, it's really hard to figure out if a measurement was done or not. And the more important question is, what are you measuring and why are you measuring it? And how do you get access to the kind of measurements, to the data? What's the bias? What's the reason you are selecting that to be published and not all the fail observations that you probably had? So a lot of questions to ask, and asking questions, that's theory. It's like coping with concepts and understanding what's a measurement that you can measure, or can you measure what's a measurement?
Right.
How do you measure the correct way to measure? Right. It all depends. What do I want to achieve? What are my tools? Why am I doing it? Yes. Why is it a good thing to do it? Yes. And in many ways, it's a very stupid idea to measure something. It can be a very childish idea to just try to give an answer by measuring something. Like, are you a good person? Let me take take sizes or something, or see if you got the right ingredients in your body and things like that. So there's a lot of good theory to be made before you can make useful measurements. Measurement, there's nothing against measurements, just you need theory to know when you measure, how you measure, what it means to measure, and what's the challenge in measuring, what's the bias you can get, and so on. So I think it was an early stage in scientific development between like the speculative, exaggerated tradition, which was a lot of it was also grasping or holding tightly onto something of the past. In Austria, we had the Counter-Reformation, which was an effort, very understandable effort to get rid of the Protestants. Not because they hated the Protestants, because they realized it's a very dangerous ferment of thinking with a lot of heresies in it, and it led to some disastrous results. You get all these sects then competing against each other within Protestantism, and some crazy utopian experiments happening in this ferment, and like doubting, thinking that everyone for himself can understand from the scriptures what God words are meant to be, and things like that. So I think there was a reason to see that there are effects to be scared about, but the result was a political one. It was the Counter-Reformation, getting just rid of Protestants by seeking out Protestants, and getting more power to the Catholic Church, while it was losing legitimacy. And that's always bad, to prop up something that turns into LARPing or is hypocritical, and then people counteract. It's like they start hating the church, crazy. So they start hating grandmothers, start hating it. They think it's politically propped up, and that's part of it why it became a bit more virulent than crazier in Vienna at the time, this clash of like the past and modernity. When you can't stop it, then it's all there at once. That was part of the reaction. So we were somewhere in between at that stage, and it was right to be skeptical about the speculative part of idealistic philosophy. And it's also part of the heritage of the Austrian School of Economics to be different to the German traditions, which tend to be more idealist and be more realist. It's like, we don't want to think about abstract concepts. We can use them as a tool. We want to understand real people, the real results. We are not judgmental in the sense that we start with the idea, what's the ideal person, and then we apply to the real one. We want to have empathy for normal, regular human beings and find something interesting and beautiful in them with all their faults. I think it's a good approach, but it was the positivism. I think it's a halfway stop in between. Then they think it's only measurements are all powerful. And everything that's not measurements is not scientific. You can only induce laws from the data, the facts. They speak for themselves. So like those who are in charge of the facts, they are the scientists, and it's the only proper way to know something. And it's still a core idea in a lot of scientific practices. And I think we've seen a lot of abuse with that. I think part of the pandemic situation also was or exaggeration based on a faulty epistemological starting point. Because when you start measuring, you only look again at human beings as particles, as problems, and you don't see, and you think you can model now behavior, how it emerges. You can model catastrophes that are looming that only you can prevent. I think there's a reason that you need good theory. And if you're only measuring and you take no interest in theory, usually it's a bad sign, because that can come from a will to control. It's like, I don't care about what you say, let me measure you. It's like, I'm deciding what I take from you. It's just the outside, again, the behavior part. I take no interest in what are your motives, your background, biography, your intentions, and as long as I can't measure them, and then it's your fault because I can't measure them. There's this good analogy, is like a trunk that's searching for his keys out of the light post. That's because that's only the light here. It's not because I lost it there. That seems the way with this exaggerated positivism.
So there's this, there's a good intention here, perhaps. Is the term weight-free? Is it weight-free? Value-free?
Wertfrei oder wertneutral.
I'm saying it terribly, of course, but this idea of stripping away all the subjectivity, right? So you're just left with these reproducible, empirical scientific results that can be replicated. And so you're getting a human bias out of the equation, right? And you're left with just this hard, objective scientific fact. But so that's a good intention, I guess. Like you want to strip that away so that it's something reliable and rock solid that we can act upon. But then there always remains the subjectivity of, well, what facts are you selecting, right? Which ones are you presenting? What narrative are they supporting? Like there's this, although you're trying to get the subjectivity and bias out of it, the selection of the actual facts and the order they're presented, etc., you can never actually get rid of that, right? Like there's an infinite constellation of facts around us all the time.
Exactly.
So it's like, how do you choose them? Why are you choosing them? What are your intentions? Who are you? What are your motivations? Like this is the subjectivity that is ineradicable, let's say.
Yes.
And maybe we deluded ourselves, I don't know, into thinking that we can get to hard objective truth. And then, you get sayings like trust science, as we saw over the past 3 years, which is kind of oxymoronic in a way too, because you're saying don't question the science, and the science is a systematic way of questioning. So you're saying don't question the questioning. It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So that's that was an ideal, I guess, that we were working towards, but you can't actually attain in the real world for all these reasons we've laid out. But then the ideals themselves, you mentioned the circle, for instance, right? Like, well, there's such thing as a perfect circle. Like we don't observe them in nature very often, if at all. But mathematically, you can have a perfect circle, right? Where it's equidistant from the center on all sides. And you were saying that, like, okay, these ideals matter to the extent that we can check or verify them. Aren't we, like, with the perfection of a circle, for instance, aren't you sort of verifying it within, it's like a self-contained verification in a way, right? Like you're saying within the system of mathematics, I can prove that this is a perfect circle. Doesn't that it's not attached to the real world though, right? It's only within that.
Yeah, that's a very important question of philosophy, actually.
Yes.
It leads to a dualism, but Mises gave an answer in Hayek partly. Yes, if you start with axioms and you deduce, you're within a system. And you don't know, usually axioms, most people think axioms are arbitrary. Mises thought, no, with human action, we can start with an axiom that's not made up.
It's irrefutable, right?
This is irrefutable because it's the essence of how human beings act. And so you can see that it's a very strong insider intuition from inside. As I know something about human beings because I won. It's different from outside observation. Yeah. And then I can communicate with other people and in a sense verify, there's some similarity here, at least in this very basic logical structure. It was very important if it should be describing reality to be very strict and limited in your axioms. And Mises thought it's really just one important axioms, and then you have like a few assumptions maybe that, of course, that seem almost self-evident, but theoretically could be refuted. So it's a very a very selective approach to that. Now, what could be the link between axioms? I mean, there's the philosophical debate about if mathematics describes just a made-up model of the world, and there are, of course, alternative mathematics. I tend to assume that the regularities, how we represent them, that of course is like language. Mathematics is like a language as well. But it's a very structured language where you can have deductive insights that surprise you by following it through. And I think this kind of inner regularity reflects a regularity of the cosmos. So I think there's a link. I think it makes sense that there's a link. I think it makes sense that our mind is capable to see that regularity and even entertain abstract regularities like that. And the reason why we can see those regularities, why they make sense, and why they are in a beautiful way surprising and revealing to us, and sometimes even very useful, is that's how the world is set up to be. And I expect that the regularity that we assume now in the natural sciences will not disappear completely with a new insight that will end up, oh my God, it's all random or much worse than we thought, much less regular. I think we'll see more regularities and how it fits together and how it's based on some very modular logical elements itself that may be reflected in elements of the world as well. But those are assumptions, of course. So Ludwig von Mises is very pragmatic again. He's anti-metaphysic in the sense as well as most Austrians. They say, okay, it's no use in discussing metaphysics if we don't have a shared faith or mythology or whatever. It makes no sense. Okay, we can't really decide those questions. We can discuss endlessly if there's a God or not. It won't really bring us any further in our understanding of human beings. So he thought, let's just assume for the moment what we know and what we don't know. So it's the best approach to go about that. And he thought it's a useful approach as well, but it's useful because it's based in reality. And he says he's not claiming that he knows for sure that the world is like that. He even thinks it may be possible in the future that determinism may be upheld in the sense really everything is predetermined, because it's a metaphysical question for him. He can't decide it. I mean, he can't see the inner workings of the cosmos, so he's not strict in this philosophical stance. He tries to be open-minded in a sense, but he's reacting, of course, against the positivists as well, and I think it's a very important counterweight, and that's why he puts so much focus on praxeology as a deductive science. If he would have lived like a few decades earlier, probably he would put all the focus on the inductive side of it. Because if you only have speculation, then of course Mises or the approach of the Austrian School was say, oh, go back to reality, please, and look at real people. And if you measure it, then measure them, but at least you're doing something real and you're touching the soil. So I think a lot of it is, of course, within the context you react to something, and that's why in a theory and history it's like it's two sides. So history is for him the empirical reality, so he calls it history, not science. And so theory and science, or theory and measurement. Is a problem with measurements. It's past. Usually it's dead. I mean, if I want to measure here inside, I got to cut you off. So that's from the past. It's dead. It's not the interesting dynamics usually, in particular in economics, or as he calls catalectics, about the future. It's going to happen. What do you anticipate? No one knows in advance who'll be right. So why?
You can't reproduce the exact conditions either, right? It's like you can rerun the experiment of freezing water, but you can't rerun the precise economic conditions. So
and a lot of people wrongly assume that praxeology means you deduce everything in the world from one axiom, and it's arbitrary. Of course, it wouldn't make any sense. It would be foolish. No, you use a deductive logic to structure your mind to help you understand real empirical phenomena, phenomena that you can observe, can see, or but be aware that's not because you can see something it's important. What we call seeing is a very small part of a spectrum that was useful to us for our survival. There's a lot of cultural elements to it, of course. I mean, we've been able to discern more colors with cultural progress and discernment and differentiation.
The unseen typically tends to be the grander, more influential structure, right? Like the laws of physics tell us a lot more about how things, about how phenomena manifest than any particular phenomenon. I think it was too that I heard this might be apocryphal, but someone asked Mises, how do we know humans act? And he said, through observation. So maybe there's like a mutual informing between theory and observation, that even the axiom of action itself I guess you could say also through self-reflection. It's not just through observation, it's also through being a human, as you said. But there's this element of, well, if we didn't ever conduct the action of self-reflection or observation, we would never have the axiom of action to build this structure on. And the other point, the way I really like to put this for people is, we could say it's axiomatic in the sense that it's this unshakable assumption. And I think it was Hoppe that his book, Economic Science and the Austrian Method, where he described, if you try to argue that the axiom of action is not true, right, that humans do not purposefully use means to pursue ends, then in that act, you're using the means of argumentation with the end of trying to refute the axiom of action. So therefore it's irrefutable, right? Like, to try and argue against it is an action. So you're proving the axiom and trying to disprove it. That's what makes it such a strong foundation.
Yes, I mean, many people still assume it's a rhetorical trick. Well, I think it's a strong argument. I mean, when Mises is measuring both like this performative contradiction that would arise, but also he measures observation in the sense I have to see other people and realize they're human beings myself, and their behavior could be explained by action. So that's part of it as well. So it comes from reality, I'd say, but there's different ways, and he just calls it self-evident in a sense. It's even, it's unthinkable that it wouldn't be like that, and you'd only argue about it if you don't like the conclusions. It's like, why would you argue about that human beings act? I mean, you can argue a bit about like how relevant is choice, but that's not what it's about. It's not a claim that we are always rational pursuers of obvious ends. No, that's not what he means. It's that we are not entirely determined, at least even they start claiming metaphysically, but it's not useful to assume that we are determined by outside our environment. The best way to explain why a human being shows a behavior, moves from left to right, is not to assume that some cause attracted him to the right and he had no other way. That can happen, of course, but the best approach is to assume he had a reason to go there, because there was something that he maybe, and there are very different reasons that can lead to the same kind of behavior. And that's a useful approach, I'd say, and it's not a permanent, not a very strong metaphysical statement. Of course, it depends on human freedom. It's like you could say, if you don't want to be metaphysics, say it's better to treat human beings as if they are free.
Right.
Because it's from what we know, what we don't know is the best way to cope with it.
Yes.
It's the best way to cope with the unpredictability of human beings, but still not make it seem random, then it'll be fatalistic. It's like I have no clue why people are doing it that way, and I think it's a good compromise to assume, and I assume that it's true in the real sense that human beings are free, which doesn't mean that we are always independent of our environment, not at all, no. We are free, which means we bear responsibility. We can stop acts. We can act against even our life interests. We're able to commit suicide. We are able to bear pain. We can go against our instincts. We can do terrible things to which animals aren't even capable to do so. So there's this added element of responsibility. And epistemologically, it's best to assume that you can't predict the behavior of a human being just by looking at the environment.
Right.
Usually it'd go wrong. It's like this.
Right.
The bad kind of prejudice that comes not from really knowing a kind of people and seeing as a kind, but from just the context, the outside observation. Usually it's not useful, it's not true.
Right.
It doesn't help. So
again,
it doesn't really matter if it's about truth or false or usefulness of a methodology. I think in both ways it's well-founded, the praxeological approach.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the three-body problem earlier, right? We have three objects in a gravitational dance.
Yeah.
the combinatorial explosion, right, that happens, you can't predict how those three simple objects moving through space and well-defined parameters, you can't predict all the motion going forward. So it's like, well, what makes you think you could predict a human that has trillions of variables and inputs and biases? It's like the three-body problem extrapolated to the highest degree. So of course, like, to just be rational, and you have to be humble in front of that. And I think too that you mentioned freedom. The axiom of action is something I've been thinking about, because Viktor Frankl had the final human freedom, right? Which he said that we always have that gap. Every human has that gap between their circumstances and how they choose to respond.
Yes.
And that's the freedom that no one can remove.
Yes.
Even if you're in solitary confinement and being tortured and beaten, all your freedoms have been taken away, you can still choose to respond positively to the prison guards, which he did, right? When he was actually in internment camp. And he saw other people doing this as well, and they fared much better. And that idea that we have this fundamental human freedom seems to accord itself well with the axiom of action, that you can't ever say deterministically what a human's going to do. So you might as well assume they're free. So that kind of maps onto Viktor Frankl's final human freedom. It's very anti-totalitarian in the sense that you can't have totalizing knowledge. Like, the axiom of action almost proves that you can't have totalizing knowledge. Like, because just tell me what this human's going to do when I say the word elephant. Like, you don't know. You can't possibly know. And it's also very pro-humility. As I said, just taking this humble approach to complex phenomena. So all that, I don't know, that just seems like when I hear determinists or the scientific materialists arguing against free will, it's like, well, if you just present these arguments, it's like, how you could not call it free will if you want. You could say it's all deterministic, but we just can't see it. But like, what's the value of that statement? You're just saying that determinism exists where you can't actually prove that it exists. So what, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't seem to serve any end. So you might as well just say they're free, because even if they're not free, you can't tell me deterministically what they're going to do. So you might as well assume they're free.
That was Mises' approach as well. If it'll be an endless metaphysical debate that's useless, and can be figured out. I mean, I think you can be curious about the mental processes, and then you can use the neuroimaging and so on. We now know that a lot of it has been wrongly interpreted in this kind of, like, we've refuted free will with our experiments. But of course, we never know it. It can be that we can get one day a complete image of the mental processes and then be able to predict patterns. I don't think so. I think there are like physical reasons that it doesn't work like that.
I agree.
But those are metaphysical questions. You still can be curious about them, and go about it in a disciplined way.
But Mises took the humble approach of saying it's an open question, and let's just talk about what we can know, right, rather than what we can't at this time. That makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you about, so we talked about language. Math is effectively a language as well. We know that language largely is metaphorical, like the way it's how we physically interact with the world, is how we create words and phrases. The word to understand is like to stand beneath, to get a deeper perspective on something. We often use metaphors like, the concert is past, or the event is in front of us. So we're like metaphorizing that these events are spatially related to us, but they're actually in time. So we're using metaphor all the time. And then money too is like this language, and I'm not these means of communicating, right? And a metaphor, the word metaphor actually is a metaphor, means to carry over, right? To look at something in a new frame. And so we're using words to, I guess, frame human conceptions. We're using math to frame these sort of universal patterns or abstractions. And then we're using money to frame human action or the economic consequences of human action, perhaps.
That comes from Carl Menger, the equivalence between money and language, that both have something similar.
Yes.
They are spontaneous orders of cooperation. And it's best to understand language as arising out of interaction and being useful for interaction. So it has something to do with action.
Yes.
And is, of course, is the end or intent is to communicate and cooperate with other people. But it's not a top-down thing. It's something that emerges that has to prove itself in these actions. That's a strong interest that Wittgenstein takes in like seeing what language actually is. And he sees the language mainly as activities. He thinks they're like, he calls it games, maybe a bit misleading. He thinks language is mainly games. So don't look too much at the words themselves. You can't like take them apart as elements. Look at what they do in the situation. So they follow, of course, language itself can be a game. It follows some rules and you want to achieve something. But every kind of discourse, talking with each other can be games of distraction. It can be a game of communication, a game of cooperation, a conflict game.
Argumentation.
So, and I think that's a good frame to look at it. And that's a similarity with money as well, as kind of protocol infrastructure for interactivity.
That's fascinating. So a question I don't know if it's a question or just an idea to explore, but like we talked about math within the confines of mathematics, a self-contained language system, you can define a perfect circle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering is it possible, and that's an ideal, again, right? It doesn't really exist in the real world. Is it possible that something like Bitcoin is an idealized money? Like, have we created an ideal within the language of money itself, that we've created something that fully or almost fully embodies all of the things we want in money, just like a circle is, all sides equidistant from the center type of thing?
I don't think so. And Menger thinks neither. He thinks those kind of protocols can only be discovered. It's almost impossible for us to create it. And the reason is this interactivity, which is a very complex thing. It's a reflective thing. And it's figuring out if it works for us. There's something intersubjective. It's not entirely objective. It's not entirely subjective. I can want it as much as I like. If you don't understand me, it doesn't help. So it's a fit. But it's a real fit. It's something real. This connection must work or not. And there's a way to say if it works or not. And to plan it in advance is impossible. You have to figure out if it works. And usually with language, you figure out along the way. Have you understood me? Have you used the right words? I got to improve my vocabulary, learn new words, or figure out, oh, wow. And that's the most interesting thing. We're using the same words, but
a sign saying me.
And that was an important insight by Wittgenstein, of course, but by others as well, that he thought most of philosophy turns around using the same words for different concepts. And that's why they endlessly talk about it, and they never reach a solution.
Right.
And you're like, hey, you haven't figured out the language.
There's a broken social consensus on the word itself.
Yes.
So people just talk in circles. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
What so is Bitcoin discovered or invented then?
I think it's discovered.
Really?
It's discovered. It's a very typical innovation, which means it's a gradual process. It attaches previous innovations in a new way.
Yes.
So it combines previous innovations in a new way. Very hard to see from the beginning. So even for the inventor, in this case, it's not obvious how it's going to be used, if it's really the bigger thing or not, if it's just an experiment. And I learned about Bitcoin very early, too early. And at that early stage, I thought it was impossible to see the potential. I even asked cryptographers at the time, the university, how they would assess that, and then I asked two, and both said, no, forget about it, it's not a good solution. There were good reasons for that to
Right.
not see the potential. So I don't think you can plan it in advance. And I don't think it makes sense to assume that Satoshi Nakamoto is kind of a predictive genius. He's a great innovator in that sense, but it's still, it had to work out in reality, and it takes a while, and we're still learning, and we're still early, and we're still trying to figure out what is this thing,
Right.
what it is useful for, what's just an idea that's not really working out. People are not understanding. I mean, it doesn't help you if the ideal thing,
Yes.
but no one gets it. And we're
Right.
still more or less at that stage, it seems like. And then you start thinking, okay, are people stupid?
Yeah.
What's going on? How long does it take you? But it's better to approach it. No, it's a discovery. You got to discover it. And when you're ready, you discover it.
Yes.
I can predict it.
It's an uneven process, right? And yet, what's the quote that talent hits a target nobody else can hit, and genius hits a target nobody else can see? So I actually agree, and no disrespect to Satoshi, but he's not a genius in that sense, because there's a long tradition of the cypherpunks that saw the target, right? The separation of money and state. Many had taken their shot and missed. He's the one that finally took the shot. Again, building on prior innovations, combining them in the right way, took the shot and maybe hit it. Hopefully, seems like it's going well so far.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. That's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. With Wasabi Wallet, you can receive, send, and store Bitcoin privately. In Wasabi Wallet, your transaction history and wallet balance are completely hidden. Wasabi Wallet is easy to use. All of its privacy features are built in by default, and it works with any amount of Bitcoin. Wasabi users can make CoinJoin transactions together with BTC Pay server users or Trezor Suite users. For BTC Pay server users, they can make payments directly inside of a CoinJoin, and for Trezor Suite users, you can make CoinJoins directly on a hardware wallet. These features result in fee savings and security improvements for both sets of users. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download the state-of-the-art Bitcoin privacy wallet.
So is it, if it's discovered, then is it something? Could it be something as significant as the wheel or fire, or a lot of people are accused of maybe even hyperbole in talking about Bitcoin in this way, but it seems like, I've analogized it to the number zero, that you kind of get these occasional one-time discoveries that are so simple, yet so significant in their implications. And you don't really know until there's some hindsight there. But is it possible that Bitcoin is this discovery of an idealized?
It's definitely in this class of innovations. It's called the carrier technologies by Schumpeter. We call it protocol innovations. And they're like carriers for new innovations because they use them as a rail. It's like a new way that makes new things possible. So it's in that class of innovations. We'd see if it's a protocol that's adopted or not. And that really, unfortunately, doesn't only depend on how perfect the protocol is.
Right.
It depends on a lot this person-to-person, peer-to-peer discovery.
Yes.
Figuring out, is this a fit for my ends and my concrete?
Right.
Can I approach the means? Can I see? Can I understand it? And that boils down to Menge's major insights into how economic change happens.
Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me, I think at the end of Human Action, Mises makes a point that if a particular tool is more useful, like there's a shovel that is lighter or better for digging holes, like that tends to outcompete in the marketplace. Like everyone mostly will end up using that shovel because it's superior. But he said that's not true of ideologies or social constructs, right? It's more about who's selling it, how well they're selling it.
Yeah.
And so money's a weird one because it exists between these two worlds. It's like there is a physical instantiation typically of money, but it's also very socially constructed like language. So I'm not like, how does that competition actually work in the sphere of money? Like, does the better money always outcompete, or do we actually have to evangelize it properly, or is it both?
Better for whom is one question, and better for what is another question.
I guess when I say better, I mean for the individual life, liberty, property kind of.
Yeah, there's a long-term optimism. I mean, we've seen the outsized importance of good monetary protocols and structures in the past. And I think it's completely underrated how important money protocols have been, not only for material wealth, but for culture in particular. A lot of like the cultural centers of Europe are nodes in the monetary network. And it is needed this monetary infrastructure to bring together people, goods, ideas, and get all the network effects of bringing people together. So it's about bridges. Money bridges people, like language can bridge gaps between people, make us understand, and that's why it has this outsized importance. And in the past we had monetary protocols that were not perfect, idealized, but for a phase we could distinguish better and worse forms of money, and we could see that better protocols lead to better results. But still, I mean, it's a very short time in history we can look at, and we'll see. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that Bitcoin is the better, best available protocol for the world we live in right now, and for the challenges it brings in a different world. It may be different. So it can be that Bitcoin is such a good fit because the world is as bad as it is. It's like maybe without all that fiat money interventionism, it wouldn't need something like Bitcoin. It would be like something simpler that would work as well and do it.
Presumably if we were on a gold standard that worked, Bitcoin wouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Because it probably wouldn't have grown in terms of purchasing power so rapidly because currency wouldn't be getting debased so quickly. We'd probably have sounder, more peaceful, more prosperous world. So it would be hard for this thing to get attention maybe in a gold standard, but the fact that things are so bad, so divisive, so dark makes Bitcoin really shine bright in comparison.
And as always with technologies, like with organisms, it's wrong to assume that evolution leads like to a thing, the best thing or the fittest is a wrong assumption. It's a good fit for circumstances, and a really moral answer to it. Of course, it has importance as a protocol for human beings, so we tend to attach something moral to it. That better working is also a better the moral sense, but it doesn't have to be. Knowledge is spent on the usefulness for the means, for the ends.
Yes. So you make a great point, like money, like language, like math. Again, another one of these linguistic structures that are language protocols. Perhaps it's connecting people. Obviously connects us across space in the present moment, but it's also connecting us across time, right? You can move purchasing power into the future. We can make investments. We can perform economic calculation over long periods of time to participate and collaborate in very large enterprises, And one of the main, and this gets into the concept of time preference, right? Where if your money is depreciating very quickly, this isn't the only influence to time preference, obviously, but it's a major one. If your money is depreciating very quickly, then you're incentivized to consume rather than invest. And vice versa. If your money holds purchasing power, you're more incentivized to invest rather than consume. So the nature, I guess when we talk about time preference, which is a big topic in Bitcoin, we immediately get into the nature of incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very much an open question to me. Like, how much do incentives actually shape the general patterns of human action that we see in the world?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I could just ask you first, like, what are incentives? It's kind of hard to define, actually. And then how much do they influence human action? And then is it the highest point of leverage we should focus on? If we can't change human nature and you can't change the world, well, maybe you can change how the two relate if incentives are a good point of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of a three-part question: defining incentives, to what extent do they influence human action, and then is that the highest leverage point we should focus our engineering efforts?
Yes, I think there's one wrong conception about incentives. It's that they work so well because we are determined by material interests. And that's usually interpretation of mainstream economics. Would argue that a large part of economics actually looking at incentives, but they assume it's because that's a predictable pattern.
Right.
People are materialists.
Determinism.
Yeah, it's a kind of determinism. Yeah. And it's wrong. Still, looking at incentives makes sense. It's the cui bono. I mean, for whom does it bring an advantage? But then, of course, we have to define what kind of advantages we look at. And the more universal the benefit we look at, the better it works as a conceptual device. So, of course, I mean, it could be beneficial for you to have blue flowers, and it's your personal preference. But by looking at that incentive, I think often blue flowers wouldn't help that much because it's not very universal. So usually we talk about money. And you think, but of course, because money is the material thing. It's the opposite. As money is a very spiritual thing. And that's why it's so universal. It doesn't tell you what you need to get. So you can be an altruist and you still need money. You want to help lots of people. You need money. And the same is, I mean, maybe weaker, sometimes stronger incentive is legitimacy, attention, praise. And that's useful to look at. I mean, what does he get out of it is this thing, but it's only the get out of it. With all the differences we have, we look at the most universal ones, and money is one of the most universal means to various different ends. That's why incentives, in particular monetary incentives, work if you look at lots of people. If you look at one person, no way to predict.
Right.
There's no way you can say, now, okay, if I'm offering him €1,000, he'll do that for sure. You don't know me. It can be that it's the opposite. I stand up, go out, say, okay, you're that kind of guy. I didn't know that. And things like there's no way to predict it. So if you look at lots of people and, we have all these variations, you look at very universal means, you get a tendency. Because it could be that one person doesn't change, does the opposite.
Yeah.
But if you're like thousands of people, you say at least for more, they'll be in a situation where the marginal benefit of the offer is just the way that they don't change their behavior, they don't change their preferences, but it just fits their preferences so well. It's because of course having €1,000 more than not is better. And then I look at like what I have to give up for it, and people have different preferences. So the approach of the Austrian schools, why do incentives work, is because people are so different. It's not because we are all determined. And when you have lots of people, you have so many differences that for sure there's someone who's just on the edge, who just really needs these €1,000. Like he was waiting for that. He needs it. It's like the cancer surgery of his child, and he's 99,000 raised and is 1,000. And then of course, and you say, of course he was determined. Not at all. So that's the reason why it makes sense to think about incentives. If you look at lots of people, and it's in particular important in institutional design. It's better like to have institutions work because you count on a lot of people being intrinsically in a situation where they say, okay, that's good for me.
Yes.
So it's not against their interests. And it makes sense because it's very hard to establish rules against the interests of people. Because I know you want something else, but still I make you. And then you have to control people.
Which has a cost. One thing that came up for me there as you're saying that, circling back to an earlier point, that Mises argues that social cooperation is like the universal means. Money, I guess, is a reflection of that, right?
Yes.
It's a manifestation of social cooperation, because if you are stranded alone on an island, all of a sudden that money is worthless, right? There's no one to trade with, there's no social cooperation. But to the extent that you're integrated into a functional trading society, the money is like a universal means, right? It's an option on anything the market can produce. So that's an interesting connection there.
Yeah. Of course, explains the focus of Mises on money, whereas the important monetary theorist, and he was at the time also recognized as the world authority on international monetary structures.
Yes.
And that's why he calls the largest part of economics catalectics comes from exchange, bridges between people.
Then so we can't know, so incentives work because people are different, they have different preferences. And when we say, what is the influence of incentives on human action? Are we then saying, okay, over the widest set of people, this is the thing that we can say with the most determinism will influence them?
It's not influencing them. No, it's
not influencing them.
It shouldn't be. I mean, if you really try to influence people with incentives, usually it doesn't work. It's sometimes used in companies, like you get a bonus.
Right.
And that doesn't work that well. And the reason is that we adapt because we think, okay, of course, then if I don't get the bonus, I'm punished.
Oh, okay.
So it's a new baseline. We adopt to a new baseline.
And
say, okay, I got a bunch of poor people, I dangle my dollars and they'll do everything and there'll be incentives. No, once they get used to the standard, you have to come up with more and more and more. And then, of course, we have a monetary problem of where's all the exponential value coming from.
No, sorry. When I think about this, though, I think about a central bank, right, that can print money out of thin air, effectively, under a legal monopoly. Those dollars can then be doled out arbitrarily, right, lent to corporations or helicopter money, whatever. And then that money can be used to create real jobs for people. So, like, if you have an institution that can centrally counterfeit currency, they can directly change the patterns of human action in the sense that they can create jobs that were not there before. So people waking up and going to do an activity every day that they would not otherwise do if there weren't a legal monopoly on currency.
Oh, there's a lot of change necessary for that to happen. Cultural change and surrounding, because there's nothing that makes a person take a job, need a job, want a job, every kind of job. The natural baseline is, someone offers me kind of fancy papers to do something I find nonsensical, unethical. I say no.
Right.
No, thanks. Why should I do that? So I must be in a situation of need and really think that, but usually it's legitimacy much more so. It's like you get a job comes with legitimacy. And of course there's a big salary then as well. But it's not like I'm a fool now, then be like a prostitute, of course.
Sure.
No one really says, okay,
isn't there?
It's cool, you got that much money there.
Right. No, I agree. But I'm thinking of like very standard blue collar worker that's sort of in a pernicious situation where the existence of the central bank is also stealing his purchasing power, right? Making food more expensive, gas more expensive. So he has more of an incentive to take whatever job he can get.
Yeah.
And then maybe the jobs that are actually being made available to him are different, right? So there's less blue collar work available, more government bureaucracy work available. So
it's a vicious circle.
Yeah.
It comes mainly from indebtedness. Indebtedness makes people need to take any job. Right. Hold on to it.
Yes.
And be really under the authority of a boss. And so people realize it's a win-win thing, or should be a win-win thing. So it's more the structural change, and it dissipates for society. It's not directly the money thing. It's not like people are materialistic and they see the fancy science. It's a cultural process of adopting that mindset, and it's much worse because it's hidden and it goes over time.
But there's some connection to the material incentives, though, because you use the word indebtedness.
Yeah.
Would you agree that fiat currency incentivizes people to go into debt?
Yes, of course.
So we're actually, by shifting the incentive landscape, you're causing more people to become indebted, which puts them more into that position.
So you have lots of people who are like marginal debt in the preference structure. Say, if it's a bit cheaper, the debt, I would take it out under certain circumstances. Also need the legitimacy for debt. I don't look like a fool. Everyone else is doing it. Of course, I take out a loan. That's how you do it. Stuff. So it needs a gradual process. And sometimes you realize, okay, there's this marginal law. The marginalism is part of the Austrian School. It's like you can't extrapolate. You can't say, okay, we'll increase debt and everyone will be indebted.
Right.
We have a lot of distortions happening. So it's not obviously that you can extrapolate. So the increased indebtedness is not just producing more money. It's all the side effects of the distorted monetary systems, distorted legitimacy systems, then also cultural change that I think generally a lack lack of competence or valuing competence. A lot of it's just getting people jobs and not thinking that it's that important how well they do their job. And it's of course there are incentives in the sense there are always some people ready to go for that. Yes, there are people that will go into prostitution, and we have different levels and different contexts. It's not that they are worse people in a sense, but in a different context. And so you get like everyone who's ready to do it at a certain price, you get them. If you lower the price, you get more and more people. Yeah. If that is for free, you'll have much more people. Not you can't have 100%. Fortunately, it doesn't work like that. That would be deterministic. It's like, why aren't you indebted as well? And that you'll see, and then you can even have counter reaction because in zero debt, zero interest debt, of course, at least there's so many distortions that it can lead to counter reactions.
No, it's a great point. It's hard to disentangle. I'm reminded here too. I think this is in Hoppe's book, A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism, where he argues that the rate at which you violate private property, again, not determines, but influences the rate at which society morally decays, right? Because you're rewarding a non-productive political actor, right, for taxing you or inflating the currency. They're just stealing from you. They're being made richer in this system. More people are copying them, emulating their strategy. And on the other side, the victim, the productive market actor, has less of an incentive to be productive because they're keeping a lower percentage of the fruits of their labor. And so over time, this shapes the actual path of character development, culture, morality. And so again, is that incentives interacting with morality or perhaps ethics through this material dialectic?
That's the long-term change that I would differentiate. Now, it would be deterministic if like the short-term effect is always there.
Right.
And there's a long-term effect. I'm not sure if it's really the material thing. I think it's at least as important as the dissipating change in the social structure. See, because at first you get only people who are ready to take the reward and do something that you wouldn't usually do
at the margin.
But they are elevated at a certain position. And it's not just they have a salary for doing something immoral and stupid and incompetent. It's you get all the legitimacy with it. It's a proper job and you just don't understand it, and it's a diverse employee and things like that, and you need that as well, because otherwise it'll look foolish. I mean, if everyone behaved as they behaved before, and the mindset was the same, if some rich person comes around and pays you $1 million to do something very stupid and immoral, still people will ridiculize you and won't be adopted as the new success model. It's only over time, a gradual process. And that's the thing, that we are not all the same. There are, and that's an insight of Hayek as well, intellectuals play an outside role, and those are like the gatekeepers in the narratives, the legitimacy structures. I mean, who is a fool for doing something? Who is a fool for missing out? Who are the serious people, like the real ones? Of course, not prostitutes, because they have proper jobs and proper trainings and so on. And that's a lot of narrative change. And of course, it's if you have some narrative change that having a lot of fiat money income in a job is something great and successful, then people will tend to copy it, and you'll be proud about your father, and he gets $1 million for selling bullshit, violating the integrity of other people. And no one ever found something distasteful about that. Yeah, of course, then you can kind of follow in that pattern and see, I want to be as successful as my dad. But you had that always. So it's, I think, more the structures. But of course, the material, the very universal means can explain a lot. And a lot of people can be in a context where they say, I can't be choosy what occupation I take. If there's only prostitution left, I'll be a prostitute. There's nothing bad about it. It's a need. I can survive. I can make my child survive. And that's a bad situation. It doesn't come out of the incentive, the structure of the society.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. Like there's a preference structure at any one point, and they're just going to respond. But maybe in the long run, that preference structure is sculpted by the options available, which have to do with material incentives. That's interesting to think about. Then, so on the third, I guess first of all, the third point of the question was, is that where we should focus our energies, like as a point of leverage, trying to restructure the incentive systems? I mean, obviously money being perhaps the most motivational system of them all. I'm not sure which one's more effective. Is that, like, in Bitcoin circles, we say, fix the money, fix the world. Is that like where we should focus our energies to have this outsized return? And if not, then where should we be focusing our energies?
The continual Hans Hoppe, as you mentioned, I think he gave a great advice. And if you're talking about like changing legitimacy structures and narratives, he thought the most important thing you can do is ridiculize. But in a sense, it's not like mean, it's just like showing that the emperor has no clothes. Just speaking it out. And
making fun of the satire.
Making fun of the right people, in a sense, not taking yourself too seriously. So just say as it is. He's supposed to be successful, but look at what he's doing, where he's coming from. How really ridiculous his arguments are, the presumptions are for that kind of job or that kind of position or that kind of narrative structure.
Twitter's great for this.
That's part or the appeal of it. But then again, I'd be wary about answering questions like, what could we do to change? Again, I think you can't really plan it. Can go wrong. If you're really good at that, be that. I think you can be a good Twitter troll if you like that, and I think it's okay. I'm not had a kind of victim mentality. Say, oh my God, he made a bad remark on Twitter. How evil, how terrible is that person? I'd say no. For some communication styles, people are good at that. They can be very sarcastic, and that can be hurtful. But it's, I think, your life risk if you're on Twitter, you can be hurt. That's part of the language game. Twitter. If you're good at that, do it. I wouldn't say it's like an universal means for all ends to be a troll on Twitter. So there can be other reasons to have a different style. I have a different style to communicate different ends. I think it's already generally the idea that how can you change the minds of people. I think it's better to assume that they have their ends, and if they have some ideas, maybe some of it is complacency, of course, and not caring about ideas, just repeating what they've heard. So then I don't take it too seriously. I don't think you're an evil person because you parrot an evil idea of legitimate people. You have interests that are opposite to mine. That's that's fully or unconsciously you're aware of that, and that's why you pursue some ideas. So change rather comes from different ways than convincing a majority. It's like I don't think there's a foolproof strategy. How do we win the 51%?
Right.
It's like this perfect communication strategy, even the perfect ridicule strategy, the perfect argumentation by Hans Hoppe.
Right.
It's not going to make that happen. And the reason for that is change never happens that way.
No,
5% that change, and then the 51% eventually get it.
right. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so I'm very interested in this relationship between, I don't know, human being. Like I've almost taken the position, and I don't want to sound like a determinist, but it seems like there's a significant extent to which we, like the way we are, our character, our morality, our patterns of behavior and action, they are emergent from, there's a theme we've touched on a lot here, right? The technological paradigm we inhabit, the incentive structures we inhabit, that we are in feedback with the world, a world that we create, right? So what do we say? That we create the world, and in turn the world creates us. Like we're constantly in this feedback loop.
Yeah.
And so the question for me is like, okay, how do we create these structures such that we can optimize ourselves in the process? And now one of the things we hit on today is, okay, social cooperation is this universal means. Like no matter which end you're pursuing, you almost always need social cooperation because it gives us all these amazing things like productivity and division of labor, et cetera. You also just need more people to do bigger projects, right? Like you can't do everything yourself. You need more hands. Many hands make light work. Social cooperation is optimized under conditions of private property, as Mises argues, right? The history of civilization is inextricably linked to the history of private property. So does that mean private property is a universal means in a way that it helps us access social cooperation?
Yeah, I think it's a protocol as well. And you can look at rules, of course, a kind of software of living together. And I think private property is a good rule, a very simple one. And the aspect about private property is its spheres of responsibility.
Right.
And I think that's a very good rule to have differentiated spheres of responsibility and have the capacity to say no to something.
Right.
The essence for Mises, all the advantages of efficiency doesn't come really from the market. It's based on private property.
Right.
It's based on you saying, no, that's mine. I don't want it. You offer me something. No, I'm sorry. I don't need it. I don't like it. And it's this feedback that helps us. That information, because then now it's trial and error. Now we can figure out something.
Right.
How do we get win-win?
Yes.
Without that, no prices, no calculation, no efficiency, all goes to waste. You do something stupid that I don't need. I just see you don't need a mismatch, and we're all angry. We're all angry at each other.
That's right. And that it's the word that keeps producers honest too.
Yeah.
Because if I'm the only car dealer in town and you're negotiating with me, I'm like, you got nowhere else to go. I'll sell it to you whatever price I want. I'm a monopolist. But if I know you can say no and you can take your business to my competitor next door, then I'm going to deal with you in good faith.
Yeah. And based on that protocol, the most important change agent then is the entrepreneur or promoter. I mean, it's bad wording.
Yeah.
That's Mises. He was like promotion. Is
selling an idea, right?
You are a part of a change that you bring about, but by offering something new and by making people aware of it. And it all depends that they can say no. And it's a good change because it has this discipline. Of course, they can not, a lot of good innovations are not seen by a potential client, but still it's the best way to go about change. It means try to make it as modular as possible, make a very small change, make it obvious to other people how it's a good fit for their ends, and get their voluntary consent. There's a good checkpoint. From that you can scale, then you can have more change.
Right.
It's not perfect, in particular if you have a distorted structure, but it's a good advice. Usually if you want to have change, go for the entrepreneurial ways. based on humility again, is I try to come up with something useful, very small thing. Because it's small because I got to figure out if it's really the right strategy or not.
Yeah.
If it's really useful, it got to be big. It
Yes.
can become big later on. So advice would rather be for change, go the entrepreneurial way. And I think it's a polite way.
Yes.
It's a better way. And if you don't see that way open, something really bad can happen. And that's what Eric Voegelin thinks is at the basis of most of conflicts and political craziness. And he calls it anoia. And he thinks it's a mismatch between your soul, he says, and the order you live in. So it's like, it doesn't fit, it's terrible. I have this great idea how it should be. It's not like that. And then I have my model, I look at the world, I say the world is shit, people are shit, and then it's a terrible mismatch. It leads, he thinks it's a pathology, it's a sickness of the soul. It's an inflammation of the soul even. It's an inflammation of the soul, and then you do crazy stuff to heal, to deal with that inflammation. And I think it's a very astute observation and how these ideological movements have come about. And his advice is to find a good match between your soul and the world as it is, not as you like it to be.
Right.
Can be ready to accept the way things are, the way human beings are, that some change takes time.
Yeah.
That you don't know for sure it's the right way. Still doesn't mean that you don't have values. It just makes you help it understand what can I change, what can I change, and be in a productive situation to the gap, the mismatch between what you like to see and how the world is. Because if it's too far apart, then you become the utopian that creates new world and that starts to hate the world as it is. And that's the danger. You want to get rid of everything. You want to destroy everything so that my shining, idealized world can emerge. And it really turns into violence. And there's a good term that comes from Freud. He hasn't used it properly. I think it's this thanatos as opposed to eros. Eros is striving for life. Also Hayek uses this, the living, as you want living, the flourishing. The thanatos is the death drive. I hate the world so much. I won't have kids. I dislike you. Everyone should commit suicide but myself, of course. Let's reduce our footprint to zero. Stuff like that. I think I think it's correct to see it as a kind of pathology of the soul. It's an inflammation. There are good reasons for that. So I think we should be compassionate about that inflammation. In particular, the young can be afflicted by it with all the craziness around them, but still it's a serious condition, and take care that this doesn't lead to anti-social behavior like politics.
Yeah, it all seems like many of us go through that phase when we're young, right? You look out onto the world and you think this is wrong, that is wrong, and you feel almost like a revolutionary orientation to the world. And you get a little bit older and you start to realize there might be some wisdom in the way things are structured, even if there are still changes that are necessary. But it's a great point. So just to try and put a button on this, social cooperation is the universal means, private property is the institution that facilitates the greatest degree of social cooperation. I think it's a pretty fair statement to make. And then superimposing that onto Hoppe's argument that the rate to which we violate private property is the rate at which we drive the moral decomposition of society. What is the value? If Bitcoin is something, I don't want to say it's inviolable private property, but it's probably the closest thing we've ever had to it. It's something that you can truly own independent of anyone else's opinion or any institution, any political authority. Is it possible that that creates a feedback loop in which we become better? Like a more incorruptible basis of private property leads to a more, if violating private property decomposes us morally, does really strong private property help us build ourselves up morally?
Yes, I think one aspect is pushes for responsibility.
Yes.
And for a lot of people, it's too much to feel the burden of it, like really owning something.
That's a really good point, by the way. We always say private property, right? But it's equally a responsibility.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of the thing you own,
Yes.
then you don't have the thing you own. Yes.
Yeah. You can't have other people bear the costs of you destroying the thing that you've been responsible for.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it pushes for it. Still, mostly, it doesn't change people. It's just people who don't like that kind of responsibility. Hey, find a way to like make it different, make a better Bitcoin, use custodians, use that thing, use paper Bitcoin, or not use it at all. Just hate it for what it is because it is like it. But over time, it can be a gradual push. I think it's a cultural shift. You see people going for it. You see how it changes them, or it helps them express what they could be. And you say, yeah, it's not that bad. I've met now the 5th Bitcoiner, and he turned out to be even not a psychopath, pretty reasonable person. And I think that's how hard. And I could try it as well. It seemed to be evil. It seems feasible. It's worth it.
And to the earlier point too, where if Bitcoin continues to function properly, then its purchasing power goes up. So it's a successful economic strategy that other people would emulate, right? Like, oh, these Bitcoiners are becoming richer.
Yes.
What are they doing? And so then you get this shift, right? It's like, well, they're not consuming as much. They're going to church. They're having kids. They're working out, and all these things that, again, general patterns of action you've seen Bitcoiners kind of tilt towards that might, I don't know, it's all very speculative, I guess, but it's interesting to think about these feedback loops. I mean, between the systems and ourselves, and like, if we change the system fundamentally, does that change how we look over time?
Yes. Yeah, short term, I say, it's mainly selection.
Yeah.
But long term, it changes, the culture changes around it, and it's mainly about what's legitimate, who is considered successful, is it really just the price action you've taken, or something else? What have you done with it? What have you done with the wealth? How does it show? How useful you are as a person to other people? And things like that. And that's a gradual long-term change. And there, of course, protocols should change it. It changes incentives in that sense, of course. Other people to emulate.
Yes. Yeah. We didn't talk about that today, but Rene Girard's work on mimetic desire, very interesting stuff. We're always imitating one another. And then I guess maybe we'd get different mythologies, right? It's a technological change. Is that just like the hunters and gatherers have different mythologies, and the agriculturalists, that someday will have different mythologies about digital world? It's a very interesting time to be alive. Rahim, this has been awesome. I've kept you for too long as it is. I'm really glad you're able to join me. We'll link to all these papers in the show notes. I love reading this stuff. It's always blows my mind how much thought has been paid to these kind of nuanced, complex areas. But these papers are old, right? These are 40, 50, 60-year-old papers. And, as we've touched on a lot today, these things, change doesn't happen evenly. So, people were looking around the corner to some extent to changes that we're experiencing now, but they wrote about them, decades ago. So I appreciate you recommending them. Do you have any closing words for the audience? And if not, can you let people know where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, I have an institute in Vienna. It's called Scholarium, SCHOLARIUM.AT, but it's only in German. The teaching is in German. I prefer that to go for a niche, use the native language, and of course the language many of the books and papers how the tradition were written in. I have many projects. You can see me at many Bitcoin conferences at the time, so I do a lot of lecturing in English as well, and teaching in English. You can follow me on Twitter. I think that's the easiest way to get in touch with what I'm thinking about, writing about.
Beautiful. We'll link to your Twitter in the show notes, and thank you again for doing this. This was awesome.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.